I leaned back in my chair, letting the late afternoon sunlight spill across the polished mahogany of my office desk. The city skyline stretched beyond the glass wall, gleaming with ambition, yet my mind wasn't on the view. It was on the phone buzzing insistently beside me, a small vibration that felt almost accusatory. I didn't have to look at the screen to know who it was, a name I hadn't wanted to see in years, David Caldwell. My fingers brushed the silk sleeve of my blouse, smooth against my skin, a tiny comfort in the storm of memories he always stirred. He had taken everything once, claiming my ideas as his own, elevating himself while I vanished into the shadows. I had smiled through the betrayal then, but today was different. I tapped the phone idly, pretending to scroll through emails, though every buzz echoed like a heartbeat. The truth of my life was hidden behind these glass walls. The sleek office, the awards on the shelves, the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had quietly rebuilt what he tried to steal. The irony wasn't lost on me. The girl who had been dismissed, overlooked, and silenced now held the keys to the empire he thought he had won. And here he was calling, unaware that the woman he underestimated had already surpassed him. My heart flickered with a mix of pride, restraint, and that familiar sting of old hurt. I wasn't the same person he had cheated years ago, but I hadn't forgotten. I straightened, inhaling the faint scent of my coffee, letting the calm mask the anticipation. When I answered, I knew this conversation could mark the beginning of the reckoning. I still remember the first time it happened, how clearly every detail is etched in my mind, like a photograph I can't burn. I was 24, bright-eyed, ambitious, and terrified all at once. My internship at Caldwell and Pierce had been everything I dreamed of, a chance to shine, to prove myself. And I had worked tirelessly on that marketing pitch, pouring hours, ideas, and every ounce of creativity I had into it. I carried the thick folder of proposals into David Caldwell's office, my hands shaking slightly as I knocked. "Come in," he had said, without looking up. I laid out the campaign, explaining each point with what I hoped was quiet confidence. But by the time I finished, he had already spoken to the partners about it as though the ideas were his own. I felt my chest tighten, a lump forming in my throat. My voice had caught somewhere between disbelief and fury. That was my work, I whispered, but he only smirked, leaning back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Relax, Maddie. It's not personal, just business." That night, I sat on my small apartment balcony, the city lights blinking below, feeling the sting of betrayal like cold water on my skin. My mentor, Mrs. Eleanor Hart, had once given me a small silver locket with the words, "Strength grows quietly," engraved inside. I clutched it that evening, letting the tiny weight in my palm remind me I had a choice. I could crumble, or I could rise. I made my decision there, under the indifferent glow of streetlights, holding that locket tightly. I would not let this theft define me. I would not let David Caldwell's arrogance shape the story of my life. That night, I began planning, not for revenge, not yet, but for independence, for a future where I could claim my worth on my own terms. The betrayal had hurt, but it had also lit a fire inside me. And from that fire, everything else would eventually grow. I didn't know then exactly what my future would look like, only that I had to carve a path for myself. With the silver locket warm in my hand, I threw myself into work I believed in, consulting for small brands, designing campaigns that no one had thought could succeed. Nights blurred into mornings. My tiny apartment became both war room and sanctuary. It was Jordan Michaels, a seasoned marketing strategist with a reputation for spotting raw talent, who first saw something in me beyond my portfolio. "You're not just good, Maddie," he had said one evening over coffee in a dimly lit cafe. "You're the kind of mind that builds empires." The words lingered, heavier and more exhilarating than any compliment I had ever received. But the path wasn't smooth. Some nights, I cried over spreadsheets and rejected pitches, wondering if I had the strength to keep going. I faced skepticism, subtle biases from clients who assumed I wasn't the decision-maker. I made mistakes, sometimes costly ones, and had to pick myself up over and over. Yet slowly it began to pay off. My first major client, a boutique tech startup, trusted me with their entire campaign, and it succeeded spectacularly. The rush of watching a plan I had nurtured take off, knowing the credit was mine alone, was intoxicating. Soon after, a small but profitable deal gave me the confidence to invest in my own consulting firm, a modest office tucked in a quieter part of the city, away from the high-rise where Caldwell and Pierce ruled. I kept my success quiet. Social media posts were sparse, intentionally vague. My family only heard fragments of what I was building. Even when friends asked why I hadn't applied for bigger opportunities, I smiled and shrugged, letting the world underestimate me. There was a sweet satisfaction in the secrecy, a quiet power in knowing that my triumph was mine alone. I learned to love the process. The long nights spent sketching ideas, the meticulous attention to every detail, the thrill of proving not to them, but to myself, that I was capable of more than they had imagined. And all the while, that small silver locket rested against my heart, reminder that strength grows quietly, but it grows unstoppable. The knock on my office door echoed like a distant memory, pulling me back to the day I had walked out of Caldwell and Pierce, determined to never let anyone steal from me again. I straightened my blazer, brushing imaginary dust off my confidence, and called, "Come in." The door opened to reveal David Caldwell, older, a little grayer, but unmistakably the man who had once taken my ideas as his own. Behind him, two junior partners trailed, looking curious, expectant, maybe even amused. They expected to see the same timid, overlooked woman they had underestimated years ago. I gestured to the chairs, letting them sit while I remained standing, letting them take in the room. Expensive abstract paintings adorned the walls, each one a subtle nod to milestones in my career. The shelves held awards and recognitions, carefully curated to reflect hard-won achievements. The city view behind me framed the skyline like a silent witness to my journey. They looked around, whispers breaking the silence. David's eyes narrowed slightly. This is your office?" he asked, disbelief softening into suspicion. "Yes," I said, letting the single word hang in the air. "And it's been mine for the past 3 years." I watched him blink, processing. His face shifted through a kaleidoscope of emotions, shock, disbelief, a twinge of guilt, then amazement. I let them absorb it, letting the tension build before revealing the rest. "I know you remember that marketing campaign you took credit for," I continued, my voice calm, deliberate. "The one that launched a client's product into the market as if it were yours? That campaign? It was mine. Every idea, every strategy. You took the credit, but I didn't stop there. I used it as my foundation." The silence was thick, almost suffocating. David opened his mouth, then closed it, as if words might shatter the fragile composure he had left. "I founded Sinclair Consulting shortly after leaving your firm," I said, letting the pride in my voice carry the weight of my struggle. "Today, I own it outright. Every client, every deal, every recognition mine. And yes, I surpassed you." The room was still. I could see the realization settle in. He had underestimated me, misjudged me, and now he had to face the woman he had wronged. For the first time in years, I smiled, not cruelly but quietly, confidently. This was no longer about revenge. It was about recognition, about reclaiming what had always been rightfully mine. And as they stared, stunned, I knew the balance of power had shifted entirely. The room felt smaller now, though the office hadn't changed. Power, I realized, wasn't in the walls or the awards. It was in me. I let David and his partners stew in their stunned silence a moment longer before speaking again. "Here's the thing," I said, folding my hands calmly on the desk. "I'm not here to humiliate you, but I am here to set the record straight and to define how, if at all, you fit into this new reality." David shifted uneasily, and I continued. "If you want to work with me, there are conditions. First, honesty. I will not tolerate lies, half-truths, or stolen credit. Everything you present, you must own." The partners exchanged glances, some nodding slowly, others swallowing hard. "Second, growth. I expect each of you to pursue your own projects with integrity. Stop relying on others to prop up your reputation. I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. Third, respect. This is not about fear. It's about mutual acknowledgement. You respect my work, my space, and my team, or you don't participate. I could see the tension in David's jaw relax slightly. Perhaps he realized that my terms weren't just about punishment, they were about transformation. Lastly, I added, softening my tone, learn from your mistakes. Let the past teach you, rather than haunt you. My locket rested against my chest, warm and familiar. It reminded me of the nights I had fought to rise from obscurity. I realized that the conditions I laid out were not just for them, they were a reaffirmation of my own values. I was in control, not out of revenge, but out of necessity, to protect my journey and the people who believed in me. David finally looked me in the eyes, a flicker of respect passing through the remnants of arrogance. Maddie, he started, but I held up a hand, smiling slightly. No excuses, I said. Actions speak louder than words. You've had your chance. Now, it's my turn to set the terms. For the first time in years, I felt the full measure of my victory, not the shallow satisfaction of beating someone, but the profound strength of defining my own life, on my own rules, with the power to uplift or withhold. And in that moment, I knew the balance had shifted completely. Weeks passed, and the tension in the office gradually transformed into something unexpected. David and the partners began to adjust, not perfectly, but earnestly. They learned to acknowledge contributions, to take ownership of their work, and, most importantly, to respect the boundaries I had set. Watching them grow, I felt a quiet satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge. I spent a few moments each morning at my desk, the silver locket resting against my heart, a small but powerful reminder of how far I had come. The same woman who had once trembled, unsure if her ideas would ever matter, now stood as the owner of a thriving firm. I thought about all the nights I had spent doubting myself, the sting of betrayal, and the quiet fire that had pushed me forward. Every sleepless evening, every setback, had been worth this. Occasionally, I glanced out the window at the city below, feeling both humbled and empowered. I realized that success wasn't just measured in revenue or clients. It was in integrity, resilience, and the ability to rewrite the story that others had tried to define for me. One afternoon, I held the locket in my hand, remembering Mrs. Eleanor Hart's words, "Strength grows quietly." I smiled, realizing that those quiet moments of perseverance had shaped not only my career, but the woman I had become. I had turned betrayal into opportunity, doubt into drive, and secrecy into a hidden triumph that now shone brilliantly for all who had underestimated me. As the office buzzed softly around me, I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, a voiceover only I could hear. I am not the girl who waited for permission. I am the woman who built the world she deserved, and no one will ever take that from me again. And in that moment, I knew it was not just a victory over others, it was a victory over fear, over hesitation, over the past. I had claimed my power, and it was irrevocable,